Peace, family. Oh man, I'm gonna get into this thing briefly today to double down on what I talked about, to double down on what I talked about yesterday. But I'm actually got a documentary coming on it, so I'm just gonna like just briefly go over just some stuff. But I just want to basically just show you um, a lot of stuff when I come on and I'm people say George is always angry or I'm always emotional. Hold on for a second. Let me get some better light. Or they say that George is always emotional or certain things. Well, I'm this way because I actually love my people and I understand um, how the world works. And the victors write the rules, and they don't have to follow the rules. They do what they want. And if you're not strong enough to come to overtake what I'm doing, uh, if you're not strong enough to maintain some of the things you have, we're taking it and we're forcing our way on you. This is the government. This is the world. This is world governments. Um, they may lock you up and put you in prison for 50 years for selling their drugs that they put in your communities to raise money to fund wars and create economies off of that, and then create economies off the prison systems. I mean, in a capitalist system, everything everything is for sale. Everything is about money. And I'm gonna go over this thing called the Marshall Plan, something that was instituted after World War II and the rebuilding of Europe. And a lot of sinister stuff went down during World War II and after World War II, where a lot of mafiosos, gangsters throughout the world, from Corsican gangsters to Italian mafiosos, were set in the middle of a Cold War or a war between uh, American and British democracy versus communism and fascist groups. And a lot of groups in America, like the Italians, that was once marginalized people, Irish, and all these groups, they became empowered during those times in the 40s, during the time of World War II, when there was threats of Japanese and German Navy blowing up ships off the shore, in American shores. And the CIA, or the OSS, which later became the CIA, went to went to mafioso members for in order to protect the borders here in the United States and in Italy, where Mussolini and what is that guy name? Mussolini's top enforcer. It'll come to me in a minute. Mussolini's top enforcer kicked the mafia's ass and basically pushed them up into the mountains. Went into Sicily when Mussolini took power in the 20s. He came in and just totally kicked the mafia's ass, and the communist regime was hanging mafioso members. So the spread of communists, what the British intelligence did and the United States did was go to mafia members and empower them to help topple communism in Italy. Now, why was something like this being done? Because with the push of communism all throughout Europe, it will actually destroy the so-called American or British democracy that they was trying to push throughout the world, and their UN and things that they were building. Because at the same time, these same countries were still slicing up Africa. And it was a race for land and resources. So you get a chance to see uh, how the rules were broken and made and created by the people that was in power. You have no seat at this table. You got to do what we tell you to do. So I'm not going to I'm not going to talk forever. I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to get in and get out. but I just want to just show you what's coming. Basically show you what's coming. So this is just going to be something short, getting basically to double down on what I talked about yesterday. What's up, Russell Lawrence? Okay, good. I'm in. So let's look at this video from the 40s where you have a group of powerful men in suits explaining the Marshall Plan. So let's look at this, and I want y'all to listen intently.
Given much aid to the impoverished peoples of Europe on simple humanitarian grounds.
Hold on for a second.
We have given much aid to the impoverished peoples of Europe on simple humanitarian grounds. But as a countermeasure against the attempt by the Soviet Union to communize Europe, the American people saw the necessity for cooperating with the non-communist countries in a comprehensive bipartisan European recovery program, passed by Congress and hereby signed by President Truman. This program, known also as the Marshall Plan, is designed to afford eligible nations that margin of help in credit and materials which they need to bring their overall economy back to health. Secretary of State Marshall, in placing the plan before Congress, stated,
"Why must the United States carry so great a load in helping Europe? The answer is simple. The United States is the only country in the world today which has the economic power and productivity to furnish the needed assistance. The 6 8/10 billion proposed for the first 15 months is less than a single month's charge of the war. To be quite clear, this unprecedented endeavor of the new world to help the old is neither sure nor easy. It is a calculated risk. It is a difficult program. And you know far better than I do the political difficulties involved in this program. But there's no doubt whatever in my mind that if we decide to do this thing, we can do it successfully. And there's also no doubt in my mind that the whole world hangs in the balance as to what it is to be.
So when you hear
we have given much aid.
When you hear him say the whole world hangs in the balance, this was the whole world to the benefit of Europeans. Now, mind you, America and Britain was trying to keep those countries under Allied forces and not fall under communism. So there was a race and there was a war going on. So let's look at the breakdown, because I want y'all to understand what the Marshall Plan was first, and then I'll get into the aspects of how they actually worked with the Mafia and what they did and how the Mafia became in power. So we have this is a 2-minute video here. You get a chance to see like the aftermath of the war and what happened.
The Marshall Plan has been called the greatest example of U.S. public diplomacy done right.
Wait a minute. Let me stop it for a minute. Everybody, I got 37 people watching me so far that's coming in. What I want everybody to do is write this down, the Marshall Plan, right? Because a lot of y'all probably never heard of this. Write down the Marshall Plan, then I want you to look this up. And you get a chance to see the fight between communism versus Allied forces, right? And tactics that was used, underhand tactics that was actually used to get things done.
In history, the more you learn about World War II, the more you realize how incredibly destructive it was, beyond a measure that we can even think about now. You have to look at the photographs in order to see the destruction of the roads, the homes, the factories, all of the industries in certain parts of the European countries, completely destroyed to the extent that they couldn't even rebuild themselves. As a result, some very wise people in the government, George C. Marshall, the Secretary of State, of course, who had been a general in the war, and the president at the time, Truman, made the decision that in order to rebuild Europe, that would be in the interest of the United States, not only because Europe has always been an important partner to the United States, but also because this seemed to be a pivot point in history, a time in which if there was no assistance to help rebuild Europe, then other systems of government might come in.
The whole situation is critical in the extreme. But there's no doubt whatever in my mind that if we decide to do this thing, we can do it successfully. And there's also no doubt in my mind that the whole world hangs in the balance as to what it is to be in connection with what we're endeavoring to put forward here. Thank you.
For that reason, as well as others, the United States dedicated a significant portion of its own federal budget to help rebuild Europe.
So now this is important because a lot of you guys talk about reparations and things that you think that we should be reparated for, repaired for. And in 1948, they provided more than $15 billion to help finance rebuilding efforts on the continent. The brainchild of the U.S. Secretary of State was George C. Marshall, for whom it was named. It was crafted as a 4-year plan to reconstruct cities, industries, and infrastructure heavily damaged during the war, and to remove trade barriers between European neighbors, as well as foster commerce between those countries and the United States. Now, they had to rebuild Europe because this was about business. Now, they didn't want to allow other groups, other countries to come in and rebuild and then force their politics and way of thinking on the people. Now, you have to understand this. Some will say, George, what are you talking about? Why are you doing this? Well, you have to understand the people in France and in Italy and those at that time did not want the Marshall Plan enacted. They did not want U.S. democracy, and they fought against it. A lot of the countries didn't want this. So it wasn't easy for the U.S. militaries to get in certain countries that was being occupied by communist forces, and also Germany. So what they did was the United States government enacted mafioso members and Corsican mafia members to go in, infiltrate certain places with the help of the CIA, which was first known as the OSS, to bring down these countries. So they went into what we would call the underworld and allowed these mafioso figures to move with autonomy. So let's get off into it. Let me see where I want to start. So it says the CIA, the Mafia, and the Italian election in 1948. After the overthrow of Benito Mussolini, all right, so Benito Mussolini came in and he basically kicked the Mafia's ass. And he had Cesare was his main enforcer, who was going in. He was hanging Mafia members, running them out the country. He was going ham. And Italy, that boot is inside the waterway of a major trading post that the Allied forces needed. They cannot afford to let Italy fall to communist regime. So, any type of fascist regime. So Mussolini had to go. The Italian government, dominated by a coalition of political entities that included the Italian Communist Party and the Italian Socialist Party. As Europe began to rebuild after the Second World War, the influence of the Soviet Union was felt throughout the continent. In the winter of 1948, a Soviet-backed communist coup occurred in Czechoslovakia, moving the country strongly to the Soviet sphere. American foreign policy professionals were deeply concerned over the influence of the Soviet and Italian politics. Now, mind you, because this is all about trade, international trade, and being able to control waterways. All of this is important. Shipping and waterways. If Italy were to be positioned under the influence of the Soviets, it would provide the communist bloc with a location in the center of the Mediterranean, isolating the Middle East from British and American shipping. And now they wouldn't be able to either bring in goods or ship out goods to certain places because it will be blocked by a communist regime. So now this is warfare now. And war is being fought on many different levels, out in front where you can see and underground. So what I'm saying yesterday, I'm backing up what I was telling you guys yesterday with information and another video that's to come to break it all the way down. This is just short. In 1948, Italians elections, the Soviets had an opportunity to consolidate influence and power in the Italian peninsula. America newly formed CIA, derived from the wartime office Strategic Service OSS, moved to prevent a communist takeover of the Italian government. CIA operatives and agents worked with contacts which they had made and nurtured during the war years with American and Italian mafias. These contacts provided links to local politicians in Italy and provided financial support through the direct distribution funds provided by the U.S. government through the CIA. And they made that money by allowing, during the time of the war, by allowing mafioso members to move heroin through Italy, Corsica, and into South America up through the United States. They was making money by allowing these mafioso members to sell heroin for their contacts in Italy to help bring down communist regime. So the U.S. Navy made a deal, went to the prison of Lucky Luciano and made a deal with Lucky Luciano and deported him back to Italy so he can go do his thing. While he was deported back to Italy, he found his way into Cuba. So let's get to it. CIA operatives and agents worked with contacts, I read that part through the CIA. The CIA also provided funds to mafia-connected labor leaders to ensure that the communists would not be able to obtain control of labor unions and thus their important supports in the general elections. That sounds familiar now, right? Russia and the general elections, labor unions. We're hearing something like that now with Trump and Russia in 2020. In the United States, more than 200 labor leaders of Italian descent met in conference and generated letters to newspapers in Italy endorsing resistance to communist influence in the unions. The United States announced that Italians who endorsed the Communist Party in Italy would be forever denied entry into the United States. So now the United States was using their powerful grip on people that wanted to come to the United States. And they said, if you follow fascist groups, you will never be allowed to come here. And they also began to empower Italians in America with certain jobs and civil service jobs and different things in order for them to persuade people in their homeland to not support communist regime. And this is how your Italians came into power of the rackets unions and the labor unions, because deals that was made with the United States to stop the spread of communism throughout Italy. And this is why the Italians to this day still run unions. As they had during the war, Italian and American mafia leaders worked in tandem with U.S. intelligence agents to identify persons of influence to provide them with funds necessary for them to control the vote in their areas. The Communist Party in Italy suffered a crushing defeat in 1948 elections, but U.S. funding of Italian political party, labor unions, and organized crime continued in Italy well throughout the 1960s, because that was the time of the Cold War. It's amazing how I'm teaching this good information and numbers is dropping instead of going up. Well, sometimes I feel like it's worthless doing this shit. The Fidel, and I'm gonna tell you why this is important. This is important when we talk about our reparations argument and we talk about all the things that happened to us, because the reason why I teach this puts a further indictment on the United States for all of our people that's in prison during 50, 60 years, because this information actually indicts the United States government on their underhanded deeds in order to push forward their so-called thing of democracy. And they allowed these sawed-off gangsters to put stuff to actually flourish in America and flood our communities with drugs over and over and over again, and then incarcerate and prison our people when they actually had their hand in it. So now when we're having a reparations argument, this is legitimate. This is legitimate. In 1946, organized crime members from the United States and Europe held a meeting in Cuba known as the Havana Conference. Now, this is important because while the U.S. government allowed Lucky Luciano to come out of prison where he was serving, where 1939, if I'm not 1937, he was handed down a 50-year prison sentence for so-called white slavery. White slavery means he was running a prostitution ring, and he was given a 50-year sentence. And 6 years into his sentence, they come up into the prison. Wow. They come up into the prison and they get him out of prison. They get him out of prison and they deport him back to Italy to do his thing. And then in 1946, he ends up in Havana and he runs the Havana Conference, where all the major mafioso members from around the country and the world descends down on Cuba, where Batista's running Cuba at the time, and they begin to X out their plan on how they're going to make their money. They was grossing at that time $100 million, basically like a month, running illicit and illegal business out of Cuba, under the tutelage of the so-called CIA-backed Lucky Luciano, who wasn't lucky. He had powerful governments behind him, so that you could take that lucky shit off. Meyer Lansky represented the Jewish mob delegation, along with his silent partner, the Jewish mob's of Havana activities, Fulgencio Batista. A decade later, the American, said they was $100 million a year. A decade later, the American organized crime owned casinos in Havana that was generating over $100 million a year. So now Fidel Castro overthrew Batista's regime in 1959. The mob bosses having aligned with Batista was forced to flee, leaving behind their lucrative financial empire, useful not only for cash generation, but also laundering money for illicit activities. Now I want y'all to listen. Including the narcotics trade, the mafioso fled, determined to return after first eliminating Castro. They soon learned that their desire to kill Castro was shared with the United States government through Central Intelligence Agency. Mob leaders had already worked with CIA operatives in Havana and South Florida, smuggling stolen weapons to Batista supporters in 1958. So now the CIA worked with the mob to fund, to actually smuggle weapons into Cuba to support Batista, to stop Castro from coming to take over, right? So now you have the CIA. Now the CIA was doing this because they wanted to block Russia from who was supporting Castro from getting so close to their waterways. Yeah, to stop being so close to their waterways. So the United States government went to the gangsters again. They went to the gangsters again and funded them to help Batista stay in power. One of the operatives involved in the operation was Frank Strugus. Strugus was later one of the burglars arrested in the Watergate complex, triggered the investigation which brought down Richard Nixon. And this is what I'm saying. Like, these people had autonomy, they was just running wild. Although a congressional commission later denied that Strugus ever had an employee of the CIA, he moved in a murky world which included U.S. agents and mafia contacts. In a conversation with Meyer Lansky after Castro had forced many of the mobsters to leave Cuba, Strugus, who was then going under his birth name Forini, was told that it would be worth $1 million to Lansky and his Italian cohorts if Castro was taken out. Lansky's comment, whether serious or not, set in motion a series of events coordinated by the Mafia and the CIA to eliminate Fidel Castro. These included assassination plots to kill Castro by diverse means in different locations. The CIA Mafia connection regarding Castro's continued through the last years of the Eisenhower administration and through the Kennedy administration, and when revealed beginning in the 1970s, led to the conspiracy theories of mob Cuban CIA involvement and the John F. K. Kennedy assassinations. Fidel Castro used Frank Sturgis to obtain information on criminal activities and records of several American organized crime members, which Sturgis obtained through contacts with the United States law enforcement. Sturgis, at the time Castro Air Force Director of Security and de facto gambler supervisor, soon changed sides despite having participated in mass executions of Castro's enemies and served as guerrilla warfare trainer. After being approached by Meyer Lansky, who indicated he and his gambling cohorts would pay to have Castro killed, Sesco derives a plan to assassinate the Cuban leader during a visit to New York to address the United Nations in 1959. While Castro was in New York, registered at the Stalter Hilton Hotel, Sturgis registered at the name under, he used his real name, and they basically set up another plot that was backed by the CIA to kill Castro, but it didn't work. It didn't work at the time. Castro ended up staying in Harlem at another hotel. But I don't want to stay on the Castro thing. Let me move down some real quick. Yeah, because I don't want to give all of this. Let me move to the other side. So here we go. So this is here. Let me move over here. What's up, skinny boy? Yep, he met with Malcolm X, but that's where he ended up staying. He ended up staying over there in Harlem. Who I got up in there? Third Degree Burns, Voice of Reason, The Knowledge of Life, James Turnip Seeds, Black Voltron, B1 for Life, Keep It Techie, Lawrence Burrs as always. All right, let's get all right. So it says, let me move up because I want to stay on the Mafia. All right, contrary to popular belief, most intelligence work of this sort is not conducted by spies or agents, but by collecting information from citizens themselves. Hayden met with Lansky, who relayed to Lucky what they were looking for. People either lived or stayed in Sicily that would be sympathetic to the Allied cause. So now this is the U.S. government and the Navy now working with the mafioso members to help them get into Italy to actually bring down the fascist government there. This is the Allied forces. The British and Americans lacked even basic information, so they were looking for people who had drawings, postcards, and especially maps. It was obvious to Lucky that the Navy had a long way to go, but Lucky was very happy to help rid his native Italy of the fascist dictator who may have had him lynched if given the chance. So now the fascist groups was trying to rid the country of gangsters, where the Allied nations, which we live up under, was actually supporting the gangsters and the mafia members to help bring them down. But yet and still, like I said, they got our brothers and stuff in jail for selling cocaine, where they was allowing these mafioso members and setting up deals to actually move with full autonomy. Lucky was definitely the right man for the job. He set up a narcotics operation in the old country a long time ago and simply used his contacts in Sicily to help. He loved the idea, and the people he asked to help were happy to assist. Lucky and Lansky came up with a couple of names that would help him in their quest. One of those was Joe Adonis, who was indicted for just about everything in the United States has a law against, but never saw prison time. They also recruited the Don with the most Sicily ties, Vincenzo Manigo, aka head of the Gambino crime family, the executioner. While the executioner got to go to work on contacts in Sicily, Joe Adonis went to work in New York. He nabbed. Now I want y'all to listen to this. I want y'all to listen to what the United States government did with the Mafia. He nabbed every Italian American he could find that once lived in Italy, even kidnapping the former mayor of a Sicilian town. Adonis was extremely effective at his job, but his secret weapon was Lucky himself. So now the U.S. government used the Mafia members during the time of the war to go kidnap people that lived in America that came from Sicily or Italian countries that may be sympathetic towards the communist plight. Sometimes some of the Sicilians were very nervous. Lansky later testified. Joe would just mention the name Lucky Luciano and say he had given them orders to talk. If the Sicilians were still reluctant, Joe would stop smiling and say Lucky would not be pleased to hear that you was not helpful. By mid-1943, Lucky and company had produced a trove of information to aid in the invasion. So now they was using them to help because America and the Allied forces was planning to invade. And they had to figure out how to get in, how to get into Italy to invade. Because I told you, Italy, that boot was a very important trading post, strategical trading post to move through the Mediterranean. And the Allied forces and the Communist forces wanted Italy. By 1943, Lucky and company provided a trove of information to aid in the invasion and provided the U.S. government with several names of possible sympathizers to Italy. Several two-man commando teams armed with Lucky's information boarded a plane bound for Europe. Also, in mid-May, the Allies were able to fully secure North Africa, which freed up forces for the invasion of Sicily. They pushed their preparation for invasion and was ready to go in July. When Patton's army landed, he had several of the two-man teams embedded in his unit. One of the particular groups used Luciano's contacts to conduct a highly important mission. So watch this. They invaded, Skinny Boy, they invaded Italy with some mafioso members, man, to go after communist regime. Right, and under Luciano's word, because General Patton and British intelligence, the United States intelligence didn't have a clue on how to get in. They only was able to get in through Mafia members that was pushed up in the hills by the Mussolini regime, because the Mussolini regime had kicked the mafioso members' ass. So let's go. July 9th, 1943. Several decades earlier, an Italian-American killed a police officer, and Lucky successfully smuggled him out of the country and into Italy. Lucky gave American agents the man's name. When they found him, he led them right to the Italian Naval Command headquarters. The agent said that Lucky's name worked like magic, like a magic wand system. All of a sudden, a mixed unit of Navy operatives in Italy, wise guys armed with pistols and shotguns, were raiding the command headquarters together. The Mafia provided cover fire while the agents penetrated the building. A trove of intelligence was gained from the mission when the agents cracked their safe and stole the documents inside. The Allied, well, now listen, right? Because this is important. The Allied invasion of Sicily, while not without difficulty, was an extremely successful operation that resulted in the collapse by August 17, 1943, thanks to key intelligence provided by Lucky and the Italian Mafia. The Allied landing went smoothly and victory was achieved. Now, while this is going on, Lucky is chilling in Cuba, running drugs and prostitution rings, which he was in jail for 50 years for, and shipping In Cuba, they also have controlling the casinos. Let's keep going with that. So, Operation Underworld and Operation Husky was virtually over after the Sicily invasion of World War II. Would be almost 2 years long later. The day after Germany capitulated, Lucky Luciano filed a request with the government to be released from prison on contingency to be deported to Italy. On February 10, 1946, Lucky left the United States for the final time and boarded a ship to Italy. Now, mind you, I want y'all to see this. Lucky helped them all from a prison cell, right? Get this done. So now they ship him back to Italy. But right here, you see they have the Havana Conference in 1946. Lucky was deported back to Italy in 1946. So how the fuck does he end up in Havana? But we'll keep reading because I'll save some of it for when I'm really coming with the information. In 1954, at the time of the Hurlins investigation, Thomas E. Dewey, the prosecutor who convicted Luciano, allowed the Navy access to him when he became governor. When the investigation commenced, Hurlins felt that Dewey had some explaining to do. But the governor held fast and also lobbied against the Hurlins report being released to the public. In 1977, the Freedom of Information Act allowed the report to be declassified, and the American public gasped at the scope of the operations. As for Luciano, he tried to set up shop in Cuba but was sent back to Italy. He died in 1961, a free man, and allegedly ran his illegal operations from Naples until his dying day. So this is one aspect. So then we go over here. Hold on a second. So then we go here, skinny boy. Yeah, the FBI also used them. So now let's go here, right? So this is a history of CIA and drug international trafficking, and this is a very important thing. I'm gonna read this whole thing, and then I'm gonna be done with this aspect. But I wanted to go live briefly because I said a lot of things yesterday in my live stream. And I want to thank everybody for the cash apps also yesterday. I said a lot yesterday, and I wanted to be able to back up what I was saying so that way people can see real information. Like people get a chance to see real information. So it says 1947, in its first year of existence, the CIA continues U.S. intelligence community anti-communist drive. And agency operatives help the Mafia seize total power in Sicily, and it sends money to heroin smuggling Corsican mobsters and Marcelli to assist in their battle with communist unions for control of the city's docks. By 1951, Luciano and the Corsicans helped pool their resources, giving rise to the notorious French Connection, which would dominate the world heroin trade into the early 1970s. The CIA also recruits members of organized crime gangs in Japan to help ensure that the country stays on the non-communist world. Several years later, the Japanese Yakuza emerges as major source of methamphetamines in Hawaii. Now, you remember, Hawaii is U.S. controlled. And when you go to Hawaii, if you've never been to Hawaii, which I've been to Hawaii, I should have downloaded the picture so I could show y'all pictures of me in Hawaii in 2002. They have American language, and then at the bottom they have Japanese language. So the same way when you come to America, how you have American Spanish, when you go to Hawaii, it's American and Japanese. 1949, Chinese Communist Revolution causes collapse of drug empire allied with U.S. intelligence community. But a new one quickly emerges under the command of nationalist KMT General Li Ma, who flees Yan'an into eastern Burma, seeking to, and I got a stream coming talking about General Lee Ma, seeking to rekindle anti-communist resistance in China. The CIA provides arms, ammunition, and other supplies to KMT. After being repelled from China with heavy losses, the KMT settles down with local population and organizes and expands the opium trade in Burma and northern Thailand. By 1972, the KMT controls 80% of the Golden Triangle opium trade, which was actually backed and funded back and had ammunition from the CIA, the United States government, to help them fight against communism. The CIA, 1950, the CIA launches Project Bluebird to determine whether certain drugs might improve its interrogation method. This eventually leads CIA head Alan Dulles in April 1953 to institute a program for covert use of biological and chemical materials as part of the agency's continual efforts to control behavior. With beginning names as Project Artichoke and Project Chatter, these projects continued through the 60s with hundreds of unwitting test subjects giving various drugs, including LSD. It gets interesting here. In 1960, in support of the U.S. war in Vietnam, the CIA renews old and new relations with Laotians, Burmese, and Thai drug merchants, as well as corrupt military and political leaders in Southeast Asia. Despite the dramatic rise of heroin production, the agency's relations with these figures attracts little attention until the 1970s. Now, I told y'all, the first Indochina War was with France fighting France and the Corsicans fighting with the communist regime over in Vietnam. And France lost and was bankrupt, and they threatened to leave the Allied forces and side with Russia. So the United States entered the war and again started their relationships with these people in Burma and General Mai and all these different things. So they conspired to allow heroin to come into the United States. So now when you see people like the Leroy Nicky Barnes and the Frank Matthews and Frank Lucas, and they tell you that Frank Matthews was the biggest narcotics trafficker of the early 70s, that was a crock of bullshit. They put that on a black man, but the black man was nothing compared to the CIA and these goddamn Nazi people that was allowed to defect down into South America. They put that on us, though. And they make movies about these people, but they don't make movies about the CIA involvements with these anti-communist groups in other countries to show their involvement in how they provided arms and allowed them to sell drugs with full autonomy. But they don't make a movie about a fucking Frank Lucas. This is why this type of information is important, and I get saddened when our people are so fucking stupid. We don't even pay attention to this kind of shit. You sitting there talking about Frank Lucas and these big time heroin dealers on a fucking block in Harlem or on a block in Detroit when you don't even know nothing about Frank Coppola. Yeah, we talking about fucking Blue Magic. Fuck Blue Magic. These were the real gangsters. These were the ones that was putting it in the community and using our communities as fucking cannon fire for their wars. So let's keep reading. So it says here, in 1967, Manuel Antonio Noriega goes on a CIA payroll. First recruited by the United States Defense Intelligence Agency in 1959, Noriega becomes an invaluable asset for the CIA when he takes charge of Panama Intelligence Service after the 1968 military coup, providing services for U.S. covert operations and facilitating the use of Panama as the center of U.S. intelligence gathering in Latin America. In 1976, CIA Director George Bush pays Noriega $110,000 for his services, even though as early as 1971, the U.S. officials agents had evidence that he was deeply involved in drug trafficking. They didn't give a shit about that. They didn't care about that. Although the Carter administration suspends payments to Noriega, he returns the U.S. payroll when President Reagan takes office in 1981. The general was rewarded handsomely for his service in support of Contras forces in Nicaragua during the 1980s, collecting $200,000 from CIA in 1986 alone. And that's just what they reported. Because he supported the Contras, who was also funding drugs into the United States to fund their wars. But yet and still, they don't make a goddamn movie about Freeway Ricky Ross. Are y'all listening? See, let me teach for a minute. We are supposed to have equal protection under the law. That's supposed to be enforced by the federal government based off amendments that we fought for through our civil rights. And we never gotten equal protection under the law. The CIA allowed our communities to be used as cannon fire to fund wars and to fight communism. A lot of our people were murdered. A lot of our people died. We don't understand the psychological effects that everything that I'm reading to you guys have had when they wage war on black bodies in America based off of U.S. diplomacy and policy around the world. I don't really think that you guys understand how the effects that everything that I'm reading to you guys had on American soil. And this is an important conversation that we have to have during the time of Vietnam and the Indochina War from 46 to 54, and then the wars during Vietnam all the way up until 1975, and how from 1969 to 75, how America was ravaged with heroin, and how they allowed the Mafia and certain Asian dictators to push heroin into the United States with the help of Corsican Mafia leaders. I really think that y'all don't understand. We was not provided equal protection under the law. And this strengthens our argument when we're talking about certain things. So when I come on here and talk, I don't just be talking, man. Like, you got to do research and understand. You got to be able to back up claims. So when I go out there and I'm getting at white people and I say that they put up this for the same things that we did selling drugs, they put our fathers in jail for 160 years in life. They allowed these people to flourish because the United States government and the Allied forces had bigger fish to fry with fighting against communism in the Cold War and different things, and also fighting for land and important trading posts that might have been occupied by other countries. So deals was made, and in those deals, somebody had to take the collateral damage, and our communities took the collateral damage. So let's go on. In 1970, a Christian Science Monitor correspondent reports the CIA is an organized, if not a party of extensive movements of opium in Laos, quoting one charter pilot who claims that opium shipments get special CIA clearance and monitoring on their flight southwards out of the country. At a time, some 30,000 U.S. servicemen in Vietnam are addicted to heroin. 1972. This is crazy. The full story of how the Cold War politics and the U.S. covert operations fueled a heroin boom in the Golden Triangle breaks when Yale University doctoral student Alfred McCoy publishes a groundbreaking study, The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia. The CIA attempts to quash the book. The national I can't say that word, was arrested in connection with a seizure of 59 pounds of opium in Chicago. A CIA informant on narcotics trafficking in the Northern Thailand claims that the agency had full knowledge of his actions. According to the U.S. Justice Department, the CIA quashed the case because it may prove embarrassment because Mr. Whatever his name, involvement with CIA activities in Thailand and Burma was elsewhere. So this man got locked up with 29 pounds with 59 pounds of opium in Chicago, and the CIA got the case thrown out. They got the case thrown out. So let me find this one. Because I don't want to read everything. Matter of fact, you know what? I'm gonna stop it right there. I'm gonna stop it right there. I want to find. I'm gonna stop there. Let me stop sharing. I'm gonna stop it here. And what I'm going to do is I'm gonna save the rest. I'm gonna save the rest for. I'm gonna save the rest for the documentary that I have coming up because there's a lot of interesting stuff. There was another mob figure out of Detroit. Hold on. In fact, hold on a second. I gotta share the screen again. I gotta share the screen again. This is important. This is important. This man here. God damn, what's that? What's wrong with this damn thing? Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. This man here being taken off by federal agents is Frank Three Fingers Coppola, and he ran the rackets in Detroit. He was just as big as Lucky Luciano, if not bigger. He was a good friend uh, uh, of damn. What's the guys? Help me out, y'all. What's the guy that ran the truckers union in the '60s and '70s? That was killed from Detroit. He ran the truckers. Help me out, y'all. What's his name? I'm stuck on stupid for a minute. He ran the truckers union. Well, Three Fingers Coppola and him was very tight, and Jimmy Hoffa, Jimmy Hoffa provided cover for the Mafia, this guy was deported back to again Sicily, where he had he was very powerful, and he had a lot of fascist people that was in favor of fascist members killed in the streets. He used Corsican Mafia members to basically go after certain regimes that were still in place in Italy. This man here ran a billion-dollar heroin empire, and he lived in Rome. He shipped drugs to Detroit with certain mafioso members that was able to ship all around the country through the trucking industry with the help of Jimmy Hoffa, and they was providing political cover. So it's so much. It's just so much that people, man, and he was able to move with autonomy because he helped the U.S. government fight against the communist regime. So this is Frank Three Fingers Coppola, and he was a Detroit mobster. Let me see if I can pull some of the stuff up. That's a picture of Mussolini. That's a picture of Benito Mussolini, and his fascist groups, and Hitler looked up to Benito Mussolini. This here is a picture of pull up this picture here. This man right here, Cesare, I can't even say the man's name. Cesare Charest. He was the enforcer. He was the enforcer for Mussolini, and a lot of people was afraid of this man. Like Cesare Mori. He kicked ass. And he basically toppled organized crime in Italy. And the United States was afraid of this man. The United States and the Allied forces. And this man was one of the single reasons why the Allied forces had to team up with mafioso members to go in and get him out. Hmm. Yeah, they claim to be so. But see, one will ask the question, George, why are you doing a live stream like this? And the reason why, because like I said again, a lot of ignorance about black on black crime and the things that we indulge in. But I want you guys to understand something. All of these different ethnic groups had crime amongst their own people, and the United States government supported the death of many people, the destruction of many nations. Um, Things happen because of policies that set in place. They talk about World War I and World War II, but did anybody stop and ask what was happening in Africa during those times? Did anybody stop and ask what was happening? What was the conditions of the African American during those times? When the United States government was siding with gangsters to basically push their agenda, while at the same time hanging black people, while at the same time allowing heroin to go in our communities, while at the same time allowing crack cocaine just throughout the era, the CIA's involvement because they was pushing their own agendas. But then you turn around and you see the violence in Chicago, and because you have no knowledge of understanding of things, you make an emotional response. We killing each other. They killing babies. They're killing 3 year olds and 1 year olds. But I want you guys to understand something. I'm gonna say it again. What I said yesterday and what I always said. Black people are behaving the way that they was designed to behave under the system of these allied forces. Dysfunction is profitable. They keep dysfunction. They keep groups of people in certain places around the world and us here destabilized because that's how they function. You can't allow black people in America to stabilize themselves when we influence the world, when we influence Africa. Africa looks to America to see the next move. People around the world look to African Americans for our swag, the way we speak, our inventions, everything. So if you allow the African American to stabilize itself, the influence that we have around the world would be dramatic, and the Allied forces can't afford to have that. Because see, what one would have to understand, the same way the communist regime fought with the Allied forces, black people around the world have a problem with the Allied forces because the Allied forces in a democracy is responsible for over 2 billion murders of African people and foundational black people in the Americas. It was the Allied forces that done that. British intelligence, Australians, and different allies that went into Africa, came into the Caribbean, went over into the melanated islands and killed billions. So we have a problem with the Allied forces. So the Allied forces have to make sure that they keep you miseducated. They keep you underdeveloped because underdeveloped people will make underdeveloped decisions. So when you see the shootings in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, you have to understand that what warfare is about and what they're doing around the world. They even, in the 60s, they said black leaders was teaming up with communists because we spoke out against Allied forces. So you had to be a communist. So now when you want to have a real reparations talk, you got to know what the fuck you're talking about. You're going to an Allied forces to ask them to repair you when they was the ones that's responsible for destroying you in the first place. It's the Allied forces. The Marshall Plan was set in place to rebuild Europe, to re-educate Europe, to keep Europe under the foot of Allied forces. We have to really understand and have we have to have a real frame of reference for conversations because a lot of educated people that are speaking on behalf of black people know exactly what I'm talking about. But I could talk to the master people, ask them, hey, have you ever heard the Marshall Plan? They'll be like, no. But then people regurgitate other stuff that people say. How do we beat it? We beat it with our unification. They see my brother Jason. In order for them to keep you destabilized, they have to keep you non-unified. You can't be unified under a collective thought. If you are unified, this is why they took Mandela and put Mandela in prison back then. Now, the Mandela that came out of prison, I don't know what they did to him when he was in prison, but the Mandela before prison understood the fight against these so-called allied forces and British intelligence and everything else. Patrice Lumumba, Jomo Kenyatta, Stephen Biko, fighting against these allied forces. And they tried to form Pan-Africanism because the only way to topple it is a unified force. And we don't want communist regime either. But the communist regime was willing to help people of color to fight against allied forces for their own interests. So neither one of those groups was on our side. Castro wasn't an ally. He may have been so-called nice to black people, but Castro was compromised because he was under the foot of communist regime. So we have to really understand and wake up. I just listen to a lot of the arguments, and sometimes I get into it and I say certain things, but I know that a lot of us don't understand warfare and don't understand history because the history of yesterday makes up the thought process of today, and the thought process of today creates tomorrow. So you can't have no now without yesterday, and you can't have no tomorrow without right now. I'll say it again. You can't have no right now without it being a yesterday. And you can't have no tomorrow without it being the right now. So past, present, and future all goes together. So I read things about the past which formulates the things that's set in place now. Countries that's being occupied by certain nations, trade routes, and commerce, the way things are moving. China now is impeding on U.S. and British business in Africa, allied forces in Africa. It's the same thing that was going on in the 60s now, going on now. Russian intelligence trying to get into the United States. They talking about Russian bots. But this is not a new conversation. So I'm going to do a live stream. I'll put together a little documentary. And it's going to be based off of our reparations, which I don't think that we can get under the current thought process that we're trying to do, because we don't have a nation backing us. We don't have a military. Every people that you see that got some type of reparations had a nation, even the Native Americans, the so-called 5 civilized tribes. America was supposed to be their nation and their land. What is our land? What is our nation? What are we unified under? Are we foundational black people that was already here before they got here? Who are we? Where did we come from? We have to have a nation. So it's a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to be had nonetheless. I agree, third degree, but we have to find ways in order to force the big man on the block to pay. Because like I said, the biggest war is fascist groups versus so-called allied forces who are also fascist group under the auspices of democracy. And we got to really pay attention. We got to really pay attention to what's going on. And that's why I told y'all, after World War II, these Zionist groups went into different nations all over the world and took on the customs and cultures of those people and went in and they control the nations. And they act like they Polish, Italian, Austrian, but they're Zionist Jews, and they in power, and they're controlling everything. So you have to understand just what's really going on. You know, what's really going on and who's in power. So I'm gonna get out of here, man. I gotta go out and do my daily run. But like I said, I got more information coming. But if we're gonna start this ADOS and this reparations talk, we gotta know what we're talking about. And we gotta be able to go back. We gotta know what certain wars was about. We gotta understand when we talk about the heroin epidemic, if I say this, if in future references, if we're talking about the heroin epidemic in America, right? This is important, okay, Jerron. We have to know how the heroin epidemic started. We have to know who was the French Connection. We have to know the Corsicans. We have to know the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia. We have to know the Mafia's involvement and the CIA involvement and how it was able to get here through planes and get in through South America. We have to know all this kind of stuff. We have to be well versed and educated on the aspect of the heroin epidemic of the 70s. You cannot just talk about, listen to me, please listen to me, black people. I know we had these conversations, like 27 people. I know it's other channels, these people got 3,000 and 9,000. They're not talking about a fucking thing that's going to help black people. We don't show up for these type of conversations that's really going to push us forward. And I get it, but we don't show up for it. Because just think about it, y'all. We live in these inner cities. We talk about, we tell old stories about gangsters from the 80s and the 90s and the late 70s. Some of them are our fathers, our uncles. Yeah, Big Daddy Red and Big Mooch and them. Yeah, they ran such and such projects on the south side. Them niggas ran a $10 million a year organization. But they all doing life. He been in jail since you was a kid. Matter of fact, he went to jail when your mama was pregnant with you. And you 36. They put our people away. Where they used our communities as collateral damage to flood during the years of Vietnam, to flood our communities with heroin. While so many, I want to know what's the number of black people that died from 1969 to 1975 in Boston, from Boston all the way down to Washington, D.C., all the way back to Detroit and Chicago, across. How many black people died from 69 to 1975 during the heroin epidemic? And all you want to talk about is the Chicago gangsters, the vice lords, the GDs, the Black Stone Rangers, and all these, the Jeff Fords and the Fluky Stokes, and you want to talk about these people, but they were mere fucking guppies in a fucking ocean. We was nobodies. Who the fuck is Frank Lucas? Nobody. Frank Matthews is a nobody. He's a guppy in the ocean compared to these French Connection and mafia leaders that was allowed to move with full autonomy. All of these CIA agents. I mean, it's unbelievable. The level of ignorance amongst our people, man. Larry Hoover wasn't shit. They grabbed Larry Hoover up and threw his ass in jail and left him there. While you had Corsican mafia members getting caught with pounds of heroin in American airports, and the CIA was letting them go. Venezuelan nationals getting caught with kilos in Miami, and he was let go. But Jeff Ford is still in jail. So many other brothers are still in jail. But y'all be the first one to come on here and talk about your people because of the emotionalism of Philadelphia on the trajectory of 400 homicides. So let me show you the psychological aspect of this. 104 shootings in Chicago. Oh my God, they're killing each other. We gotta come, police, white man, please come stabilize us. We can't do for ourselves. We can't stop the gangs. White man, please come help us. Come take my son away. He's a killer. That's exactly what you're saying. That's what it sounds like to the white man. See, the white men sit around at tables and create, destabilize cities purposely through policy. through years and years of racial policy. And then you see violence being enacted in these concrete jungles with limited resources. And you got people acting out emotionally. The gangs, the gangs, the gangs destroyed. Oh my God, the gangs wiped out LA. No, the gangs ain't wiping out a goddamn thing. It's the big boys in suits that's creating by allowing drugs to come in and putting them on people with limited resources and limited education. It's a process bound to explode. The Jews did the same thing when they was relegated to these concrete jungles. Man, Russell Clark, man, thanks, brother, for the cash app. Thank you again, brother Russell Clark, man, for the cash app. Thank you so much, brother. Yeah, I gotta break this down, and I gotta tell the truth. See, I don't like to see the shootings in Chicago and the shootings in Philadelphia and the shootings in Baltimore, but I gotta tell the truth. I gotta take the unpopular stance. Me crying to the president and the allied forces to come in Chicago and stop and get people ain't the answer. Because these are the culprits that created the shit. These are the people that created it. Black boys with running around with 223s killing each other. They don't make them guns. They don't make them bullets. They don't even make the clothes they put on their back. The cars they drive in. The courtrooms that they got to go into where they're sentenced for long prison terms. It's like a revolving door. You create dysfunction in the community where you have babies being born, women having babies unwed in a system of dysfunction, unprepared children being raised, not being reared up right, where it's profitable for other groups, so they have no incentive to want to stop it. Because what do you do to a group of undesirables? You assimilate them and you give them limited resources where they would kill themselves. This was systematically done. The Italians did it too. But see, I like to come in through the back door because now I can say what I was going to say earlier. The Italians was marginalized too, but you know why the Italians started to get some form of respect or was identified not as dagos or greaseballs anymore? They was identified as white because when the communist regime was gaining power, hold on for a second, y'all. Hold on a second. When the communist regime was gaining power and influence in Europe and allied nations, the United States government had to go to Italy for help. So the Italians became honorary white people. That's what happened. They became honorary white people. And so did the Irish. Honorary white people. We was never able to take this off. We was never able to get equal protection under the law, become honorary any fucking thing. So the Italians began to control the labor unions and the rackets. The Irish went and became the police officers and the firefighters. You had your honorary white folks. That same opportunity wasn't afforded to us. Wasn't afforded to us. So when you see Chicago being burned up, but then you see them allocating funds to certain white groups to subsidize housing for them outside of ghettos. Man, yeah, thank you so much again, Russell Clark, man. Thank you so much, man. It's somebody. I'm glad to see it's people out here that do appreciate, that actually do appreciate this flow of information, man. Because it takes a lot to really get on here and teach. You know, you're tired when you get off. You take time away from your family on a Sunday because I care about my people to come tell them the truth. You look at the way suburbs was created for certain white groups like Polish and Italians and Irish, where they was able to go out to suburban neighborhoods and acquire wealth that wasn't afforded to us. So now when you see, and then when you have freedmen or free black people at the time We still was being kidnapped and being hung, and still had to worry about racism. Octavius Cato was killed. I mean, you had so much stuff, so much racism that our people have had to endure and go through. We still have never recovered from that, and there was policy set in place to make sure that we don't recover from it. So when you see in Chicago, you can't scream and say, "Hey, come get my babies! Hey, come get us!" Because you're calling on to the same fucking people that's responsible for destroying your community. The only thing that's going to fix this problem is us being unified. It's us being unified. We don't have no friend in the dominant society, man. Philadelphia is at 200 something homicides on the trajectory to 400 something homicides. We got a higher homicide rate than Chicago here in Philadelphia, man. It's a city that's 51% black with damn near 1.8 million people. I live in one of the blackest cities in America. And black people, we love, we laugh, we have fun, we do it with the way that they depict us in society is the same way they depicted Italians too at one time. They just depict us worse. So we got to really understand what we up against. And I like to bring this information out. I like to bring this information out and give this information in the manner in which I give it, because it's important that we have knowledge of how our communities was ravaged. See, we can't. I'll say this and I'll be done with it. See, Brother Russell, Free Church Press, Third Degree Burns, The Life of King Wage. I want y'all, and around the world, I want y'all to understand and remember something. And I appreciate the 25 people that's willing to listen to this. I want you guys to understand one thing, that when you, yeah, Razor Ramon, and I want you to hear this too, Razor. Hold on a second. What was that? When you, damn, I lost my train of thought. What I was talking about, you said great racist mafia Wall Street. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is, though. And you have to understand. Yes, they did. We didn't get that. So now, when you're screaming for these people to come into your neighborhood, it's saying that you're not capable of doing anything on your own. And like I said, Philadelphia, it's hard to get black people to come out and stand up for themselves. I leave the computer and I go outside. I make contacts with black men, and I tell brothers, "Come on, let's make this move." So brothers are afraid to make moves. We'll get online and talk shit. We'll go out on the corners and talk shit, but we won't go and stand in the face of these allied forces and say anything. We're not willing to do it. We're not willing to be unified. And our real fight is the unification of the black man, unified together. That's where the fight is. I'm just telling you guys, the fight is there. We have to be unified. So I'm not going to stay long. I'm going to get off, man. But I want to thank the people for coming in and supporting. Again, Russell Clark, man, thanks for the cash apps, man. It's very much appreciated. I might go live tomorrow or later on again to talk about a different topic. But we had, oh yeah. What I was saying was, I remember what I was saying real quick. When we talk about the crack era, we got to know what we're talking about. We got to be able to pinpoint government's involvement in the crack era. I mean, I understand. You know what though, Razor Ramon? Just the mere fact that we are starving should be a force to unify us. Just the mere fact that we are starving, we should be able to actually point out the person causing the starvation, and that should unify us. So now, when we talk about this crack cocaine era, We gotta have information of Noriega's involvement. We gotta have information. We gotta have information of involvement from Bolivia and Mr. Suarez and who was backing Suarez. How was he able to move drugs in the manner in which he was able to move them? We have to have information on the Contras and President Reagan's involvement. We got to have all the information. See, we get so goofy. We sit there and let them make movies about a Freeway Ricky Ross and Waterhead Bo and some of the major players down in South LA. And they put black and Mexican faces up there. You don't see no white boys. And then they go make movies about it. So that way you can see yourselves as the niggas that they said you was. Then you go to New Jack, they make movies like New Jack City. And they make a depiction of Nino Brown and all the guys that ran those projects in Harlem in the 80s. But they don't talk about the involvement of these white guys in the CIA. They make a movie where droves will come out to watch it because they can identify with the crack dealing on the corners. Right, Crenshaw Boulevard, right now, 33 Burns. Right. They putting that on us. Harlem. They make movies about the Chambers brothers of Detroit and Eddie Jackson of Detroit and all the Detroit gangsters. I mean, I can go on and on. YBI, the Pony Down. We know all about Detroit gangsters, the Purple Gang, and all of this bullshit. Junior Black Mafia here in Philadelphia, the old Black Mafia, certain families. They lock these black people up and give them thousands of years in prison. While behind the scenes, most of us don't have a fucking clue. A fucking clue on how the drugs even got here in the first place. Who's throwing the rocks and hiding their hand, black man? So now when you in DC and it's the murder capital, you're screaming and crying and you're calling on the same devil to come fix your community that caused the fucking problem. See, I want you guys to understand something. Before I could put drugs in your community, I have to create economic deprivation first. I have to take factory jobs and jobs away from black men so they can't feed themselves and cause destruction in certain cities. I have to cause issues where they will riot and destroy their cities. We have to run interference first. We have to destroy Detroit. We have to wipe out Washington, D.C., black populations. We have to destroy LA. And then we'll start pushing heroin in the communities because black men will be desperate and will be willing to do anything. Broke niggas make the best crooks. It's all good. Man, you'd be surprised what a hungry man to try. And the white man know this shit. So he creates hunger. He creates despair. And then he says, I'm gonna throw you a lifeline. I'm gonna throw some kilos of heroin in your community. And we're gonna make a couple kingpins out of the masses of people. And we're gonna destroy what was left of the culture of the people. And then you see LA on fire, gang banging, killing, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, Newark, New York City. And now you're screaming, somebody help us. DC is the murder capital. New Orleans, they killing each other. Help, help, help. And you got stupid ass motherfuckers on YouTube talking shit about black on black crime. Where black people are victims of white on black crime. Everything you see happening in Chicago and Philadelphia and Baltimore places are people that are victims of racist economic policy that has never been fixed. You better understand the strategies of warfare and what they're doing to our people, man. You have to understand, in order to have the fucking conversation, you have to know what the fuck you're talking about. How Chicago became Chicago. How Newark, New Jersey became Newark, New Jersey. Why is Baltimore the way it is? Baltimore the way it is. It's vicious. It's far beyond. When I just showed you guys just in a little short, so not just a little short presentation, it's nothing compared to what the United States government did to our people, man. How they allow other countries, they allow other ethnic groups in this country to flourish because they needed those people in America to influence their countrymen to not embrace communism. So you've seen Polish people, Irish people, Italian people now begin to be moved under the category of whiteness. So now you have all these groups, they just white Americans. And all of them hate black people. Polish hate black people. Italians hate black people. Irish hate black people. A lot of these police officers killing black men are Irish. But these were the same groups that was once marginalized. Asians come here, hate black people. Because these different groups have nations behind them that allied forces needed something from. We have no friends. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it right there. Any black coon think he has the need to come up and want to challenge George? I come on with it. Because right now I'm just throwing little stuff in the pond just to see who's going to jump out and think that they got some knowledge. I'm just throwing it in there. And like I said, I thank the small audience that I have for people that really want to get information. Because say this and I'll go. The majority of folk don't want change. They just want white people to treat them better. Say it again. The majority of folk don't want change. So most people are not going to, like my channel is demonetized because I talk about this kind of stuff. And that's fine. That's why I appreciate the cash apps. Because my channel is demonetized, Skinny Boy. People not going to come out when they talk about this. How you really want to fix Chicago? Well, then guess fix Chicago in a place like Philly, you got to get dirty. You got to tell truths that people don't want to tell. You got to be willing to make white people uncomfortable that a lot of black people ain't willing to do because they like a paycheck. You want to fix Chicago? Chicago is a direct problem with policy. There's a lot of things in Chicago that we can talk about. Chicago. You want to talk about the outfit, Tony Acado, and what they was responsible for, and how they destroyed black communities. Huh? The Chicago outfit. Y'all scared to talk about the Chicago outfit, huh? And different people that ran Chicago outfit over periods of time with the help of the CIA and FBI, because all those motherfuckers was agents. Oh yeah, they been shadow banned me, man, and they demonetized me. Just telling the truth. That's why I appreciate the cash apps. Just telling the truth, Skinny Boy. We gotta do something in Chicago. We gotta when you say we gotta do something, who you calling to come do something? Who's to come do something? Right. The Chicago outfit, the black kingpins in Chicago ain't got nothing on the fucking outfit. Just saying. Do you know the Chicago outfit, with the help of Giancana, Tony Arcado, one of them, they was responsible for having the president killed? They had a hand in having the president killed. They had a large hand in the rackets out in Vegas. I'm just saying, man. Let me get out of here, man. Remember, I love my people more than they hate themselves, and I pray to the universe to create the Most High that these words was enough to inspire you. These words are enough to make you look at yourself in the mirror and make change. These words are enough to make you look at your children and know you have to make change. I hope that when you came here for information, and when you leave here greater than what you was before you came. You leave here edified. I hope that you share this information on your Twitter, your Facebook, all the mechanisms we use to get the message across. It's time that we start having a real conversation, man. And like I said, I'm rocking with it. I see what's going on in Black YouTube. Yeah, George. Let me see. He said it's amazing. He said it's amazing how everyone received the reparations, the Japanese, the Jewish, but for some reason it's a problem for ADOS. We must be God's chosen. Well, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that come with. There's a lot of things that come with that, my sister. And there's a lot of things that come with that, and some of it's gonna have to come from our unity. We don't have a nation. We don't have land. We are property of the state, and they're not going to give corporations not going to give reparations to their property. We have to be looked at as a people separate from the corporation or their property. That's why Japan and other groups got reparations. There's a lot that come with that conversation that needs to be had. That our people are not educated in, and they're not going to educate our people. The people that are speaking on our behalf are not our friends either. Some of the black faces that got the microphone as the loudest voice is the biggest fucking agent. They're not telling our people the truth on what it's going to take to properly get reparations and how to unify our people because they're taking checks they're contracted in. We don't have no friends. We don't have nobody speaking on our behalf. We don't have a nation that can lobby to the United States government and with bribes to say, listen to me, y'all. We don't have a nation that can speak on behalf of us to say, hey, we know United States diplomacy. We can help you in this manner if you help the African American people in America. See what I'm saying? What I want y'all to understand is the United States government makes deals with the Italians because they need the Italians. They need the Italian to stay allied because it's a major trading post. So the United States decides to treat the Italians better, make the Italians' lives in America better because they need the Italian gangsters to help them topple fascist and communist regime. So in return, the Italians are considered white now in America, treated better. Who does the African American or the ADOS people have to negotiate on behalf of ADOS in order for us to get our reparations, in order for us to be treated better or get something, put us in a better light? Who do we have speaking on our behalf that can leverage? Is it Nigeria? Is it Ghana? No, because those places still don't have control. Well, see, you gotta understand something, Oni. Jewish people have the world. See, let me explain this real quick before I go on. Zionist Jews infiltrated many different nations and took on the cultures and customs of those people, and they came out as presidents of those nations and prime ministers, but they're really Zionist Jews. Zionist Jews was given land and military and money from the United States government and allied forces because all of these things are being controlled by Zionists. So the Jewish don't have a land, but they have a land because the big bad boys on the block said so. They took land from people that couldn't defend their land and gave it to some fake Jewish people to occupy land, and they give them money and military aid to protect and support them because the Zionists is controlling everything. So what I'm saying, Sister Oni, and a lot of us, we have to be educated in the conversation to understand what is FBA of Foundational Americans. No, we don't have no leverage. If we had leverage, we would be able to use it. Yeah, we don't have no leverage. Our leverage would be African nations speaking on our behalf with military force, saying get your foot off my people, or saying we're going to allow a communist regime to come in here in Africa and take over if you don't take your foot off the American people. The African nation haven't spoken out like that yet, and that's why that's why we're still in the problems that we're in now because our motherland ain't defending us. That's why I broke down to y'all how Italy became protected and other groups because during the world wars, with the stop of Russia and other countries, they had to use other people. What I mean, so let me get out of here. But EFF is the closest thing Africa will have to an ally. Yeah, and they don't even control their own money. It's still controlled by France and the Allied forces. So we're pretty much fucked until we unify and be educated on how to properly fight. And I challenge everybody. Like when we start having these real type of conversations, black people not gonna show up. I'll say this and I'm done. When we have these type of conversations, it should be 5 and 10, 9,000 people not just on George Channel though. Whoever is willing to have these conversations. But black people not going to show up for it because our people are conditioned to stay up under this fascist regime disguised as democracy. But we're really up under a fascist regime too. So just look at how the Jews treat the Falashin Ethiopian Jews in Jerusalem and all throughout. Just look how the Jews treat them over in Israel.